We're going to try and figure out what that was last night.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama, AHSA's radio network. Luke Robinson, that's me. Bama Online's Jimmy Stein, that's him. This episode is brought to you by everybody, because we love everybody today. It's just something I say every time, and today we didn't have an official lead sponsor, so I messed that up, and I'm not starting over.
Pringles.
I want to thank you every day for being here every day. I want to thank you newbies for being here today. Jimmy, last night was a disaster for Alabama basketball. Now, I want to go ahead and say in advance, I know there's some people who think I'm being super negative because we normally do basketball in the third segment, but even if they had won, I would have done them in the first segment this time because basketball is a big deal to Jimmy and me for sure. But my God, Jimmy, that's the worst performance from an Alabama basketball team in years. Now, I'm going to go ahead and lead with the one thing that I truly believe. It was so bad that I think it has to be an anomaly. I don't think this is a harbinger of bad things to come. I think this is just a complete outlier of again, no excuses. Kudos to Ole Miss. If you're an Ole Miss fan, you're watching this looking for my tears, I hear you. You deserve them. Your team played really well, incredible defensively. Kudos to you. I will say I think this is going to be the exception rather than the norm for Alabama. And I think last night's performance was so bad that it just has to be an outlier. Now, Alabama, again, everybody's going to think these are excuses. They're not excuses. They're more like trying to find a reason for they're playing so bad. Maybe the schedule has gotten to them a little bit. They just look tired. Cliff Amore, for all that we've been bragging on him these last few games, I thought played terribly last night. The passes that we normally make that seem like dangerous passes, where when I was growing up, if you made passes like that, you'd get on the bench. Those passes were intercepted time and time and time again, and we didn't adjust at all. That's on Nate Oates. But Jimmy, I don't know what to say other than that was a catastrophe, and I'm chalking it up to, hey, it's sort of like the Jerry Seinfeld finale. It's a bad episode, but the whole series was awesome. Don't judge it on one bad episode.
Well, I like that. That's good. That's good. Because that Seinfeld finale was truly terrible, but no, it can't ruin multiple years of maybe the greatest sitcom in TV history. And I think there's two ways to look at this. I'm a little conflicted on which way. One way is definitely what Luke is talking about. I 50% fully agree. You can say that. I do think it's a one-off. I don't think that's what you're going to see from Alabama the rest of the season. I think it was kind of inevitable. Hey, look, if you're the Alabama fan that thought, hey, this team is invincible and they're going to go 18-0 in this slaughterhouse of a league, that's on you. That's not on the team or Nate. They were going to lose. They were going to lose. And guess what? They're going to lose again because this league is just too hard. Every night you're playing someone challenging. And last night was a good reminder that you've got to be bringing your A game every night or this league will embarrass you. And that's what happened. They didn't bring their A game and they played a good team and they got embarrassed. And I think it's a one-off. I don't think, and by one-off, I don't mean they're not going to lose again. But what I mean is I don't think that's typical of this basketball team at all. I think it was just sports. It was inevitable. When you play a tough schedule, it's tough to have your A game every night especially when you're a college basketball team and not an NBA team. Now, that said, here's the other 50% of the equation that I can't get past. it's not like turnovers are new to this team. They've been sloppy with the ball a lot of the year. And they don't shoot particularly well all the time or even any of the time. And I think the things that have been issues overwhelmed them last night. The turnovers combined with poor shooting, and it was just too much to overcome. Our concern is that turnovers are going to continue to plague the team. Now, I don't think they'll overwhelm them night after night like what happened last night. But, you know, in terms of just not blowing off the loss completely and just chalking it up to, oh, well, sports, I think there's a real problem with turnovers and with the shooting, and those things have to be coached up and rectified. And I believe they will, because I have more than 100% confidence in Nate Oates and the staff.
Me too.
Fantastic job. I know Luke does too. They do a fantastic job, and they'll coach up the deficiencies. But I think the turnovers and shooting is a deficiency and not a one-off.
Yeah. Look, again, I can't say this enough. I think this is a one-off. And it also should be noted that Missouri beat Florida last night.
Yeah.
In Florida.
At Florida. Wow.
Yeah, that's kind of nutty.
Wow.
LSU beat Arkansas. Now, Arkansas is 0-4 in the league, which is nuts, but that's that. And so, I mean, you say, well, what's the big upset there? I just think Arkansas is better than LSU, and they don't have it together. Now, the one thing that makes this worse, and I'm not blind to this, being in Auburn country, Auburn destroys Mississippi State without Janai Broome. Auburn's better than us
today.
Now, they may not be at the end of the year. They may not be, but they're a better team than us
today.
Right now. They've proven that through the year. So their schedule's been equally as hard as ours, and they have more chemistry. They have been able to win despite a lot of adversity at times and despite different styles of play. Now, we have too, for the most part. We have too. Just because Auburn is number one and doing well doesn't mean we're not good. And just because we lost last night doesn't mean we're not good. We only scored 64 points last night. We averaged 91. We had about as many – we had more turnovers than made shots, I think. That's ridiculous.
Crazy.
That is bananas. And if you just – I'll tell you what, soon as the game got started, Jimmy, you could see it in the eyes of the players.
They turned it over like 4 of their first 5 possessions.
They looked like they were exhausted already. Now, not an excuse. I'm saying that's got to get fixed. But here's the positive of it, that, okay, if Alabama is able to go into Kentucky and win, then that cancels this loss out. It doesn't cancel it out in my head in the sense that we should win every game in Coleman. We should win every game in Coleman.
You're right.
But
it would make up for the loss.
It would, at least
in terms of the standings. It really would.
It's pretty much a wash, and in terms of the standings, it would. And if you would say, "Hey, you guys, you'd go to South Carolina, you'd play an undefeated Oklahoma, then you play South Carolina, at A&M, Ole Miss at home, at Kentucky," and you say you only lose one of those games, you take that every time.
You'd be nuts not to take it.
So it's not the end of the world. At the same time, don't be blind to the problems. I'm hoping this is a wake-up call. One thing that also bothered me the more I think about it, we hadn't even talked about the statistics of it all, because really the statistics were so bad. By the way, I do need to give Aiden Holloway his flowers, because of all the people that I thought wouldn't have a good game, he had a pretty good game. Yeah. He is toughening up.
He was the best of the guards last night, which is saying a lot, because you're talking about Sears and Philon, and you know, the fact that Holloway was the best guard is notable. And heck of a player. Do you think, Luke, that Auburn, when you're talking about Auburn's better than Alabama, and I agree with what you're saying. I wonder if their loss to Yale in the NCAA tournament last year has really galvanized and driven this Auburn team.
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind.
Whereas Alabama, coming off a Final Four appearance, is more like, hey, our poop doesn't stink. You know what I mean?
Again, I can see that. And I can see, and here's the other thing that just can't be discounted. Auburn's got a bunch of dudes that have been in the program a long time.
Yeah.
Alabama, Mark Sears has been in the program for a while, but Cliff Amory's new. Of course, Sherrell's new. Of course, Holloway's new.
Dylan Cardwell arrived at Auburn at the same year that oak tree that they planted at Toomer's Corner arrived.
There's no doubt.
I'm talking about the first oak tree.
And Cardwell is not good offensive. All he can do is dunk, but he does everything else pretty well. He knows his role. And so that's what I'm saying.
Like Bruce Pearl graduated from high school together.
They have a good chemistry, which is so, it's wild. Their chemistry is good at a time in college basketball where it's so difficult to get chemistry because everybody moves on. This is not, and let's also be clear, this Auburn team isn't an all-time great team. They're really good, especially for this year. But if you had put them in, say, the early 90s, I'm just picking out a time when you had the Dukes and the Indianas and the Michigans and whatever that, and the UNLVs that in North Carolinas that had all these guys that were going on to be juniors and seniors, it would be different. But now when you have a team like Auburn, it's got all this experience, and they've got a guy like Janai Broome who's really strong. He's not an NBA talent. I've never seen him in a mock draft, but he is really good college basketball, a great college basketball player. And then you got Dylan Cardwell, like I said, a guy who knows his role and has been there forever. And you've got Todd Pettiford, who's a great freshman. You've got a bunch of Chaz Baker-Mazara, very strong, talented, jack of all trades type that has that, gets the crowd into it and all those things. They've got a great chemistry. That's another thing. We're going to come back and talk a little more basketball, but I got to get to break. But we got to come back and talk some more basketball. But right now, I need to tell you guys about Wayfair. Wayfair. You remember that Wayfair? You got just what I need. I love that little jingle. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. Whether you're tidying up, cleaning out, or just want to give your space a new look to start out the year, Wayfair has everything you need, all within your budget. Look, I'm looking for all kind of furniture and stuff just to make my house, more Lukish. That's what I want. I think Wayfair should have a drop-down menu for Lukish stuff. There's something for every style in every home, no matter what your space or your budget is. Wayfair makes it easy to tackle your New Year's home goals with endless inspiration for every space. They got it all. And give your home the refresh it needs just by going to Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. I'm also going to do this. Somebody finally backed me up on Twitter, and I know I get killed for it occasionally. Our crowd bothers me so often, Jimmy, in basketball. Yeah, I watched last night, and I'm like,
your nemesis. It's like your nemesis.
It is in basketball. In football, I kind of get it. We're more like we don't have like the euphoric moments, because we're kind of used to greatness. Now, we've had spurts of awfulness, but we're kind of used to greatness. And in basketball, we undersell ourselves. And we also, it's like we'd rather get mad about when we don't do well than celebrate when we do well. And I'm telling you, Jimmy, it's bothering me to no end. And especially now with NIL and the way everything revenue sharing is, I don't know that we'll get a new place or a new area for the students to be or whatever. But when I look out there and I see most of the people on the front row like this, and then when we make a 360 alley-oop dunk, we need some more passion. The crowd was dead last night too. If you were there and you want to dispute that, go for it. I'm telling you, I looked at it on TV. I couldn't be at the game, but I'm telling you, the crowd was dead.
It was notable. It was notable. I watched on TV. It was notable that the crowd was listless. Now, some of that's on the team for not giving them something to cheer about, but the crowd is there to get the team up when the team's having difficulty getting up. I think it's on the crowd to help lift the team when they're in a little bit of a malaise. And I'm with you as to last night, because I thought it was very notable last night that it was a very quiet crowd. Now it has been.
I think we all took Ole Miss for granted.
Yeah, I think they played the logo and not realizing how good that team is. And Chris Beard is an outstanding coach.
Been to 2 Final Fours.
Yeah, you might not like the guy, that's fine, but he is a great basketball coach. He's got some players. The big kid that tore us up last night, I couldn't believe how good he was. Morrell has been there for a long time. That's a good team, and there's no shame in losing to Ole Miss. There is a shame in losing at home and the way they played. But Ole Miss is a very good team that has Sweet 16 / Elite 8 written all over them.
Now, and that's the thing. There is no shame in losing to Ole Miss or to Chris Beard. Been to 2 Final Fours. Great coach. Yeah, he ran into some problems at Texas, but a great coach nonetheless. But that's where I think you're right. Like, there was never a time in that we were up by 4 at halftime, and it's like we were just going through the motions. And here's the other thing: Ole Miss didn't play great. Their defense was great.
Defensively, they played with great effort, but I didn't think they played great. They didn't shoot great.
And that's also makes it even kind of worse.
Yeah, it would be different if we ran into an Ole Miss buzzsaw. Like, boy, that was their night, but that wasn't the situation at all.
No, and that's really bothersome. I just the look in all the players' eyes bothered me to no end. And I'm hoping here's what I'm hoping. This is a wake-up call. And if it is, we'll look back and go, no problem. But I'll tell you, there is also this sticks in my craw a little bit. Alabama lost to Ole Miss. Well, excuse me. Alabama lost to Vanderbilt. First time that Vanderbilt's ever beaten a number 1 team in the country. And Alabama lost to Ole Miss. It's the first time Ole Miss has ever beaten a top 5 team on the road. We've done those 2 things within a span of about 3 months. That's sad.
That is. We'll see. There needs to be a bounce back game, but boy, what a draw, The bounce back game is on the road at Kentucky. That's going to be tough. Had we beaten Ole Miss by 15, that game Saturday was still going to be really tough. Kentucky is better than I expected. I didn't know they would be as good as they are in terms of what we've seen thus far. They're a fantastic, typical Kentucky basketball team, and it's going to take one heck of an effort to come out of there with a win. One heck of an effort.
Now, here's where I don't know if I'm disagreeing with you. I'm just going to say I'm glad we're playing at Kentucky.
Really?
I think that's what you need. Look, if we were going to Vandy, I'm afraid we might sleepwalk again. Going to Kentucky, I think if I'm Nate Oates, I go, okay, y'all want to play like that? We're going to be embarrassed.
I hope our fans can distinguish between playing well and losing and not showing up, because those aren't the same things. Those aren't the same things. And at minimum, they need to play well and lose. I mean, we don't need a repeat of last night.
I'll say this. The 2 losses we already had, Purdue and Oregon, and here's the other thing. Let's also we keep bouncing back and forth between positivity and negativity. The 3 losses we have, none of them are bad losses.
No,
not a one. Okay,
no.
So it's not the end of the world. It's the end of the world if you're just talking about the logo, like you said. That was a great point. But we played pretty well against Oregon, and we played okay, at least for most of the game, against Purdue. Not many teams were going to go in and beat Purdue that night. That night, not many teams at all would beat Purdue. That night, I'm not sure how many teams will beat Oregon, especially if you lose one of your best shooters in the middle of the game, which we did. So those are very explainable. This one is so crazy that I have to say, while I was embarrassed for it, at first I was like disgusted, like wanted to be sick. But after a few minutes, I was like, that's not us. And this is basketball. And if we happen to win against Kentucky, it is pretty much a wash. Now, it may be a reset button for us. And again, we may not, it may end up costing us the league or something like that. I'm not even worried about that anymore. I'm worried about how we do in the tournament, just like everybody else. I want to win the league, but it's not like the most important thing in the world. Tell you again, I'll say this again. I think both things can be true. I talked to my Auburn friends who were, really embarrassed after the Yale game. And I said, yeah, y'all did win the SEC tournament, and that should be celebrated. That said, I would have rather had Alabama's year not win the league, not win the tournament, go to the Final Four, than do pretty well in the league, win the SEC tournament, and go out in the first round. I think both things can be true, and both things should be celebrated.
No, you're exactly right. They should both be celebrated. They really should. But it just shows how March Madness, the NCAA tournament, just swallows up everything. It just swallows it up. And regardless, here's the deal. And boy, you brought that up. That's a great point. Think of this. Regardless of how bad last night was, this season, this Alabama season will be completely defined by what happens in that tournament in March. Because if Alabama goes to Final Four and wins it, y'all will not remember or care one bit about last night. If Alabama loses in the first round, then we'll talk about our, quote, Yale loss all year long. And we won't talk about Ole Miss. We'll talk about, quote, unquote, Yale and that loss. And so really what happens in March is going to tell the complete story of this team. And like Luke said, even if we win the SEC, even if we win the SEC tournament, what will happen in the NCAA tournament will be the story of this team.
One other thing about losing last night, we lose on a Tuesday, which gives us an extra day to stew over it. If this loss had happened tonight on Wednesday and then we play Kentucky on Saturday, I think we could get over it a little quicker. Like the Wednesday extra day makes it suck even more. There's no doubt about that, if you ask me. I mean, those Tuesday night losses, they hit harder. Okay, time to talk a little Rocket Money, because Rocket Money is awesome. Look, did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to Jimmy and me. We had a few subscriptions we didn't even know we were still paying for. And Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. By the way, Jimmy and I don't live together or anything. I know that made it sound like that. We don't.
Not even in the same city.
Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions. That's crazy. Look, cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Few miscellaneous football notes, from out there. A lot of interesting things recently. First of all, Isaiah Bond going pro, and in what seems to be almost a backhanded compliment in his announcement, he said, want to thank Alabama and Texas, blah, blah, blah. My thing is, if I were him and I looked back, now I know that he went to the Final Four and all those things and went to the SEC title game. But if I were him, I'd probably be like, I kind of wish now he got a bunch of money, whatever, but I'd kind of be like, I kind of wish I would have stayed at Alabama. Because he would have gone down as a complete legend forever. And
that Lamborghini thing was just a lease. I don't think you get to take it with you.
Having Isaiah Bond may have
free lease while you're there.
Having Isaiah Bond may have given us one extra win. I'm not saying it would have. I'm saying it might have.
Could have.
But regardless,
Alabama fans, I think, because he left and people were mad, I think people have had, quote, angry opinions about Isaiah Bond. He's a really good player, and he's going to go high in the draft. Now, he had some injury issues at Texas, and like Lucas said, I agree. I don't think he's ever going to admit it. We may be misreading it. I don't see how Isaiah Bond benefited one bit from going to Texas. And when you say quarterback, look at Ryan Williams' numbers and look at Bond's numbers. Ryan Williams had some really good production. He made All-American teams, freshman All-American teams. He's going to be a preseason All-American next year. So he had enough production to get plenty of attention. Jeremy Bernard had more production this past season than he had in his seasons at Washington and Michigan State. So I don't see how Bond benefited from going to Texas beyond making the playoff and playing for a good team and playing for Sark. And I'm not downgrading Texas. I get the draw of playing for Texas,
Sure.
but I'm just saying that I don't see how Bond benefited by leaving, other than he got to drive a Lamborghini for a few months.
And again, it's who am I to tell somebody who's about to make a bunch of money? But I just feel like that. I feel like that's how I would feel, at least later in life. I'd be like, I kind of wish I'd stayed at Alabama, because I'd never buy another drink in Tuscaloosa again or another meal. And now it's sort of like, If
he'd have stayed, that Gravedigger Dana Moore painting would be in every doctor's office and every lawyer's office from one end of the state to the other, every restaurant, you'd be signing that picture forever. Now the picture doesn't even exist. And it won't, because he left. And he was told that, by the way. I heard that before he left, in terms of the pleas to get him to stay, this was brought to his attention, that you're a legend. No matter what happens next year, you're a legend if you stay here. And if you leave, you'll be completely forgotten, or there will be anger. And that's what happened. But hey, it's his life, his career. And I'm not rooting against him.
Me neither.
But he's just not an Alabama player, so I don't care.
And let me also say this. For the folks who say Jalen Hurts is an Oklahoma guy, so why are you pulling for him? I'm not necessarily going to pull for Isaiah Bond. I'm not pulling against him. But when they put up stats of Isaiah Bond, I'm not going to consider him an Alabama product. I will always consider Jalen Hurts an Alabama product. I don't care if anybody disagrees with me or not. I do. He is an Alabama guy. He loves the University of Alabama. And I know that he had his bad moments, but I'll never, ever, ever in my life forget the 2008 SEC championship game. And I understand why he left. That made sense. Isaiah Bond's leaving made no sense.
It was for money. It was for money. It was for money. I mean, he left. And hey, a lot of us do a lot of things for money. I get that 100%, but that doesn't mean that we're still required to have you as part of the family. Now I'm sure he's got some friends that were on the team that he'll have forever, but I just don't like, again, I'm not, this makes it sound like I'm angry or anti-Bond, but not at all. I'm fine. You can make that choice and go, and that's fine. But you play for Texas now, not for Alabama. As far as Jalen Hurts, that's different. Again, these kids all leave for different reasons. Jalen left because he lost his job and he wanted to be a starting quarterback so he could play in the NFL. And thank goodness he did, because his experience at Oklahoma helped launch him into the NFL, where he's had tremendous success. And I couldn't be happier for him.
There was a Simpsons episode where Ralph Wiggum invited Lisa to go to some event for Krusty the Clown or whatever. And Bart was like, God, I want to go to that. And, let me take your place. And she goes, what if, he wants to hold your hand? He goes, I'm fine with that. Goes, what if he wants to kiss you? He goes, look, you don't want to know what I'll do to get to that event. That's the way I am about money. I understand where Isaiah Bond's coming from. You don't want to know what I do for money. But, all right. Real quickly, ESPN came out with their All-American team, and Tyler Booker makes it as a first teamer, so that's very good news. And Jihad Campbell makes it as the second team All-American. They don't really say second team, but they just say the guy that was under other consideration was him. And Caleb Downs makes first team All-American, which makes me want to vomit. Again, I'm not as mad at Caleb Downs, but he's not an Alabama guy from now on.
I feel similarly about Downs I do about Bond. He's just not one of us, and I'm not angry. I get it. He wanted to play for Nick Saban. Nick Saban left, and he wants to pick his own coach. I get that, but doesn't mean that I have to root for you anymore like I root for Malachi or Keon Sabb or Bray Hubbard.
Let me tell you one thing that's interesting. Cam Shanks from UAB makes first team All-American returner as a freshman. He played at Prattville. He is very talented.
Obviously.
And I have no information on this. He had 62 catches for 656 yards last year.
That's good.
Now he's only 5'8", 180. But to me, that's a guy you at least keep an eye on for the transfer portal in the future.
I'm surprised that he didn't transfer out. I mean, in terms of first team All-American return guy, those kind of numbers for a freshman, he would have a lot of SEC attention over that, not just from, quote, the Alabamas, but I'm surprised. Good for him staying and showing some loyalty to the school that offered him.
It is, but and here's where you and I are like, we get kind of hypocritical. Yeah, if he wanted to transfer to Alabama, I'd take him. And
he'd be in the family then.
Again,
I'm all about those that are choosing to be in the family.
Transferring from UAB to Bama is different than transferring from
Ohio. It doesn't bother Ohio State fans that the Alabama fans don't root for Downs anymore, or they're
not worried about it.
They're not. And UAB fans wouldn't care about.
We're not bothered that Auburn fans don't like Aiden Holloway.
Doesn't bother me in the least. As a matter of fact, I told my wife last night that I think Aiden Holloway is my all-time favorite Barner ever.
I'll tell you what.
He doesn't really care. I like Bo Jackson and Charles Barkley.
He's becoming one of my favorite players on this team. I mean, because he's growing up before our eyes. And also, I think he'll be here next year.
I don't question his effort. And I'm not bringing up names saying there is any particular player that I do. I just mean it as a compliment to Aiden. He plays hard.
All right, that's going to do it for today's podcast. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll tide.